All right, we're gonna give this a second to get rolling. Hope everyone is doing well tonight. Really, I would say I'm the warm up before the big town hall for Aaron and Kieran.
We're gonna give
So
this a second to get rolling.
let's
Hope
see, getting a
everyone
little
is
bit
doing
of
well tonight.
feedback here. One
Really,
second.
I would say I'm the warm up before the big town hall for Aaron and Kieran.
We're gonna give
So
this a second to get rolling. Very good. All right. So, Ricky, I see you over there. Good. We'll go ahead and hop in. Feel free, folks, as you're jumping into the stream, toss your questions in the chat. I've got a handful that had also come up in Discord earlier today, and definitely happy to share some of those. So, Ricky, your first one is a good one. Who is my favorite Illuvium content creator? I agree. The opening acts are always the best. We are gonna travel right to stage 3. There's no point in going lower. I'm unlikely to be able to use all of the Krypton today, given that we've got the town hall coming up in a bit. Who is my favorite content creator? This is a good question. It's also a loaded one because I want to be really cautious. I've got a lot of friends in the community that are content creators, and they all do great work. I am going to give you an answer, but I'm going to give you an answer based primarily on content, not on style or personality. So I'm actually going to say Artemis because a lot of the content that she covers directly is right up my alley. So I think everyone knows I've got a passion for governance topics, and I think she does a great job of covering that. And again, she's got a pretty chill, laid-back style, which appeals to me. So I'm going to have to go with Artemis as favorite content creator. But that's certainly not to disparage any of the others. Again, I would say folks like Scoriox and Najafe and TSG and others were instrumental in me getting some of my start with content as well. And I certainly wouldn't be where I am today if I'd not had some of their support along the way. So only love for our Illuvium content creators here. There can be only one, yeah. So we got a Highlander vibe going on. All right, we're going to run over here. So it has been a little while since I popped into the Overworld. It's been a pretty, let's see. It's been a pretty extensive break because I got very much into Illuvium 0 because base builders are 100% my jam. But we'll see what we're able to get up to here. All right, not bad. I think we're going to hop in here. I definitely know that I need at least a few of the additional Fern line. So we'll see if we can snag him while we're in here. Good. So I got a few questions, like I mentioned, that had been queued up from earlier within the Discord that I'm happy to go through as well. But I know those of you that are listening, you may have some thoughts. One point I want to make with the, with the office hours, there's been a lot of discussion in the community over the past few weeks on a number of topics. I think most of it has been fair discussion. What I would say, though, is it's always good to just try and engage beforehand on an individual level rather than just throwing things directly into the chat. I think in some cases we had individuals that just wanted to stir some things up. Others were maybe more circumspect about asking the questions. None of the topics that have been asked are things that have been hidden, and so what I would say is, this is a good time to ask if you got questions about governance or the project in general. Again, I'm going to have a very different perspective on things than the team, especially Kieran and Aaron, and so really happy to cover anything that you guys are curious about. So when Aloha season, so all right, I got to make sure I'm actually playing a little bit because some of you guys are probably here not just for me to ramble, but also to see a little bit of gameplay. Ricky, when you say when Aloha season, I'm not entirely sure what you're putting down. So help me out here with this. Are you meaning a specific season for Illuvium as far as like a theme or something else? And I got Sepphoris and only used him I think one time after, so I'm just going to probably use him in every battle because he is like one of my absolute favorite Illuvials here. So let's do this. Want I like Ramfi too. Let's go with Bloom over here. Oh, one alpha season. Okay, that makes more sense. Now I'm picking up what you're putting down. One alpha season for Illuvium 0. Soon, right? I think that's probably all I'm able to say right now. I think most folks that have been in the Discord saw the big issue that's being worked on right now. There's a little bit of final balancing and tuning that needs to be put in place for the converters, which I wholeheartedly endorse. For anyone that has not played, we're gonna go big here and just absolutely demolish these guys. Anyone that hasn't played Illuvium 0 or maybe hasn't really thought about the overall balance of the game, with the converters, they're actually structured in such a way today that it's an inflationary mechanic, meaning that they are creating more resources than they actually cost when you're starting the resource generation events. So what that effectively means is you can have a higher tier land plot that is worse at producing than a lower tier, because if you optimize correctly or most efficiently from a converter standpoint, what that means is that your actual resource deposits in a lot of cases are wasted because they're just taking up space that you would be better off with converters. So in general, that's the topic that definitely needs to be resolved before we can launch. I know they've made some changes already from the first version, but we need to make sure that's right, especially when we've got NFTs that are being generated for blueprints on the back end. So with that said, I do think like soon, meaning fairly soon, we should be measuring in days, not weeks or months here. But I would not be shocked if we heard a little bit more during the town hall today or over the long weekend here coming up. All right, very cool. I've always felt like Fern and the Blazonite line could be super strong. I think those that are more heavily into the auto battler are going to correct me, but it always ended up feeling a little bit underpowered compared to where I wanted them to be. But still, I'm very much a collector in this regard and want to have one of each of the various lineups before I finish this iteration of the Overworld runs. So Jellybean, you are very welcome. I'm always happy to organize. Certainly, time has a tendency to get away from us and makes it harder to allocate a couple hours here for it. But again, this is a great chance for me to connect with you guys. I've had a few people that have requested it recently, so perfect timing. And actually, in my interview with Artemis, mentioned this as something that I wanted to get back to. So my only concern always is the technical capabilities of my internet service provider. I'm not in an area that should be a problem, but I seem to get rugged more often than not. So hopefully this stays fully intact for the entirety of the stream. Good. Ricky, what are your thoughts? So before I jump into that, so I have to say, I think this might be the first Furies that I have seen. I have been looking for a while. I found, obviously, a few Ramphis along the way, but we have to tell Scoriox, because I know that's totally his jam. What are we going to do? I think with them both out here, I want to go and use Axon for tanking. So, Ricky, coming back to your question, what are my thoughts on Kieran's decision to provide a fail-safe loan if Illuvium needs it? Hero move, in your opinion. Yeah, it's a great question. So it's one that I certainly support. We've had the discussion really since day one of this epoch, making sure that the project is in a good place financially with the runway has been the first priority throughout. And so I think everyone saw that. We obviously have had lots of activity around governance v2. We've had a lot of activity around topics like overall, like Illuvitar's structure and the sale framework and so forth. But some of the key decisions around the safety pool creation and the adjustments to the use of the funds coming out from Illuvitars has been one of the elements. We had there were a number of IPs that got created and drafted within the council for other contingencies that thankfully were not needed and we did not have to bring to the community. So this is an element that probably isn't as obvious to folks, which is a good thing, right? There's no need for us to necessarily go through every possible iteration. But there were, again, a number of contingencies that we had in place that I think could have been deployed if they'd been necessary. In the case of Kieran's offer specifically, I agree. I think it's a strong statement. He is very confident in the overall long-term success of the project, and frankly, I do think it was to some degree almost unnecessary because he would have done that had he not made that post anyways. This has always been his statement to the community, to the council. But I do recognize that a number of folks within the community just appreciate having it in writing and having that confirmation. We talked for a while in the council session this week just about the potential terms and the administrative structure and so on. And so I gave him some I think pretty direct feedback on my suggestions for that. But again, I think it just goes to show his confidence level has never been higher in the project. And it's one of those where I don't expect we're going to need it. We're still actively involved in some other topics to continue to expand the runway. But it is nice to have that as a backstop in case it's necessary. How much team information, this is from Chris. Chris, thanks for joining us today. How much team information does a council member get in council meetings? Do you have to sign NDAs? Do you feel like the council gets a lot of information such as timelines? Yeah, Ricky, I really borked that whole fairy catching, so I still don't have any fairies. So maybe I won't tell Scoriax because that was disappointing. So yeah, Chris, it's a great question, and one that I think is particularly relevant as I'm going the wrong direction, but as we have a lot of new members that are going to be joining the councils with Governance V2. Again, we haven't officially passed the ICCP yet, but given that it was unanimous for us to move forward with the Gov V2 structure, and based on our dialogues, I'm pretty confident that all the council members are going to vote to proceed. So we're going to be onboarding, let's call it roughly 15-ish new members. Some may be existing council members, of course, but 15 total members to the council in short order. So for anyone out there that's thinking about running, I know some of you probably will be the ones that are either catching this live or you're going to be logging in afterwards to watch the replay of this video. What does it look like for a council member? So in terms of NDAs, the answer there is just a simple yes. There is, of course, content that's being shared within the council meetings that needs to be kept confidential. So there are NDA requirements. This is something that will be made fully transparent beforehand. And obviously, we would ask and expect anyone who's going to be running for the council to confirm beforehand that they would be willing to sign an NDA if they were elected. So with that said, obviously that means that there can be some additional information that's shared from the team that we would have access to. What I would say is there's two ways that information gets brought to the council. I'll grab a drink here. The first one is when we're discussing or requesting something to be made more transparent for us. So, for instance, almost every council meeting will have I would say 3 to 5 topics about game development status, or upcoming marketing plans, or something else, whatever the general team topics are, or concerns from the current council at that point that are brought up. And so we'll have those discussions. If there's a topic that, for instance, needs one of the department heads to come in and share it with us, there's going to be we'll send an invite to them. So it could be that our legal counsel joins us for meetings. It could be that Danny joins for the overall financial status update. We've had Aaron join on a few occasions. So it just depends on what the hot topics are within the community. But usually in those cases, it's not going to be just Kieran. We'll bring in whoever is the lead from the teams on an as-needed basis. So that's definitely one, I would say, key element. And then, obviously Kieran is very in tune with the generalities of the project, and so he can give us a lot of updates. So I would say Discord is pretty active too within the council. People will be asking questions and for feedback in advance of the actual the actual council meetings, and we're pretty regularly discussing those topics as they come up. So overall, I would say we get a fair amount of information on a sort of as requested basis. It's probably not as much as you might think. So like we aren't every week going into every detail with every team. It's more, I would say, along the big picture perspective of general dates, delivery time, quality, what's in the scope for upcoming launch activities. And again, more, I would say, also on like the marketing, economic structure standpoint. So dialogues like overall costs for the Illuvitars, or Overworld, those sorts of things are mainly the topics that we're concerned with, because again, we're not from a role standpoint intending to jump in and interfere with the actual game development process. Our structure is to have the oversight for the project as a whole. It's to give input and feedback where the community has topics that are of interest or concern, or just they want to see something added into the project that isn't thus far. And generally, we're gonna ask for whatever information is necessary to either make decisions or to push for those topics to be fully addressed. So, I think it's a good amount of information, and that's kind of what we see when we're asking for those details. And then the other kind of way that it works is if there's specific topics. So we've had again all of the individuals that I mentioned, and then some others that there might be a hot or pressing issue that needs to be addressed. Some of those are going to be in the form of an IAP or an ICCP that we might draft. Others are situations where the team is just asking for guidance, and we don't necessarily need to go through a voting process. It's maybe not a big topic for the community of interest. It's more just general feedback, because certainly the council has a pretty good pulse on the general state of the industry and the space as a whole. I would like to catch this guy. I've only got 2 shards. All right, we'll try and get a couple more shards here during this run if we can. So in general, the team is using us as a resource as well, based on our knowledge and experience in ways that they are probably a little bit not as able to address, because they're really focused more internally on what's being built, and then you've only got a few folks that are more, I would say, outward facing within the organization. So again, typical long-winded answer, but hopefully that gave you and anyone else who might be considering running for the council a feel for what kind of information is being discussed and disclosed. And again, at the end, our objective and goal is always to be able to serve the DAO and the project to the fullest. And so, there have been times when we have not necessarily asked for information on the front end, but it's been volunteered. There has not been a time when we've asked for information that's been withheld. So, again, generally speaking, it's kind of whatever we think we need, and or whatever the team thinks that we might need, based on the topics that are at hand. Good. Ricky, I think that's awesome that you're considering running. Not sure if you'll be able to compete for the community council spot with all the big dogs that are out there. So My my encouragement to anyone is if you are considering running, you probably should go ahead and pull the trigger and give it a shot. And I know that there's some folks that might make them feel nervous or unsure. My perspective is, as long as you're comfortable that you would have an appropriate skill set and you've got the appropriate capacity and interest to do the role, you should strongly consider it. Right? Your job is not as an individual to make the decision if you could win. Your job is to make the case for why you are interested in running and why somebody should consider voting for you. And then you're going to have to just trust the community to make the overall decision that is in the best interest of the project. But I'm very much a believer that you can't. And I just realized I'm scanning a gem deposit, so that's complete garbage because I'm not interested there. But you can't, as an individual community member, make the decision in what people are looking for in a counselor. All you can put forward is your best argument for what you're bringing to the table. And again, I tend to think, having seen the Illuvium community work over the last couple of years, most of the decisions that the community makes are pretty good. And overall, I think they're going to have a really good slate of potential candidates to consider for this epoch coming up. And if you're interested, put yourself out there. That's always my advice to people. If someone has questions specifically on running a campaign or again what it entails, I'm happy to answer those too. And I think just having transparency is important because with 15 or so odd folks that are going to be joining in this next epoch, we're going to need some really good folks out there. And so part of my intention, I love the way that Diraji had put it going into this epoch, and we were on a couple of the like the AMAs and town halls. He and I have very much shared this opinion that our objective is to work ourselves out of a role to where we could no longer win an election for an epoch for the Illuvium Council, because we would have succeeded as obviously as a team and also as a council in bringing the project to such a prominent position that the candidates that are running would be well beyond the skill sets that we would be able to bring to the table. So that's my intention as well. And in general, I think we're going to see some really good turnout this cycle based on people that have approached me about running. Good question from Chris. How time-consuming is a council role? Also, I think this is a very fair and important question, and it's the one that I think probably as much as sort of specialized skill sets, people probably underestimate this one, whereas most people probably overestimate how specialized or nuanced the skill sets are for being able to be an effective council member. I do think that most people underestimate how much time it actually takes. I will say that I didn't underestimate it coming in. It's about what I thought. In a typical week, on average, I'm going to spend between 6 and 10 hours working on Illuvium specific topics because I'm a council member. Now, your question was specifically about kind of meeting activity, but what I would say is the vast majority of the topics that I'm doing supporting Illuvium are not to do with meetings. Meetings are, in a lot of cases, the sort of final challenge board for discussions that we've already been having in the server over the week, days, weeks, or months leading up to it. But a lot of times those discussions may be more of a formality because everyone's already put initial thoughts or ideas on the table beforehand. Those are, in general, going to be generated by doing independent research, working with other projects in the sector, performing analyses on data and information that we're seeing either with the project or with other projects, talking to other advisors and folks within the industry, getting additional perspectives on topics. And that's, at least for me, where the bulk of my time has been spent. Certainly on a weekly basis, I would say that I tend to average 2-ish hours of meetings per week with the council. I would say most weeks there's probably only been 3 or 4 weeks all this entire epoch. So that's out of the last 4-ish months where we haven't had a meeting. Um, the way that this council is constituted, the meetings almost always are at night U.S. time and morning to midday Australia time. Um, that, of course, is going to be set by the time zones and availability of the folks that are on the council. So, in general, it's going to vary, I'm sure, for each of the sub-councils next epoch. I would be lying if I said that there weren't some times that it was painful, because I've had numerous meetings where I was in Europe, and so it was sort of 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. time window, or even in the U.S. For me, it's been like 11 to 1 a.m. But in general, those meetings are a couple hours a week. The bulk of the time, though, is kind of asynchronously spent discussing key topics with the rest of the council. That said, I think one important topic, and I just realized I don't think I want to do so many fire guys out here. This is probably not a good plan with this board. One important topic that I think I mentioned in one of the initial AMAs with the community was a topic that surprised me this epoch was how overall integrated this council has turned out to be, meaning I more expected it to be kind of individuals bringing topics up to the rest of the group, having the discussions and voting on things. What I have found is that we have been working a lot more collaboratively in terms of one person will bring an idea up in chat, someone else will add on to it, or will maybe grow the concept that was put forward, and you'll then see someone else take it and actually draft an IAP. Someone else will throw it in an ideas channel. Those sorts of collaborative work has actually been very, very rewarding and encouraging for me, because I don't think that most councils probably behave in that way, and I think it's really important, because as a council, no decision is going to be one that's taken only by a single individual, and so you need to make sure that you're finding the overall best solution. And there are very few, I can't think of any IAPs where sort of the first proposal or the first pass of it was what got approved or confirmed or agreed by the council, right? Every one of them has been added on to, grown, and so forth. So in general, I think that collaboration is super important to be an effective council. And so with that, it means that a lot of the work that you're doing may be in pairs or in trios as you're working on specific proposals and topics. Yeah, Ricky, I think you would have a lot to offer. I've certainly seen you work very well in the wildfire community, bringing topics up, bringing community engagement within the guild. So, yeah, man, I think you should go for it. And given your RNG successes that I can recall in the past with a number of competitions, in the worst case, we can just have you throw some ETH down in a long or a short position from the treasury, and I'm pretty confident we'll get a 10x within a couple days. So that's the other backup proposal you could make when you build your platform out this cycle.
I'll take it.
So a couple of the points that I'd gotten as questions that I thought might be interesting. I know some of these you guys are going to be also hearing from Kieran and Aaron, and again, I think they're going to have a related but kind of different perspective on them. So I thought, I'll go ahead and put out my feedback on them to the community, because these were questions that had been put into the town hall register for this cycle. So the first one was, in terms of the overall pricing, we've seen a couple proposals on sort of free-to-play mechanics. We've seen proposals and discussion on, what should the average cost of a starter versus a competitive deck be, and so forth. My perspective on this, I'm going to say, is kind of similar to how I viewed Illuvitar's, in that I believe you have to start with the end in mind with these sorts of price positioning decisions. And in this case, what I think that means is we need to be setting the price points for all of the titles with the intention to create a narrative that allows Web 2 gamers not just to come in, but when they hear about Illuvium and the first sort of initial impression is, oh, that's a Web 3 game. I'm sure it's going to cost $500 for me to start playing. That has to be very easily and cleanly debunked without a lot of effort. And so, for me, we've got this, pay per loop mechanic built into the overworld where, you're going to be paying for each cycle based on fuel. I think there's a couple ways that we can manage that. The first one is if you are setting the price point such that to obtain a fairly solid kind of starter to like intermediate level deck, it needs to be similar to let's say like a full gameplay experience for another Web 2 game. So if we're talking something in the $40 to $60 range, to where that type of price point allows you to build out a reasonably diverse deck of alluvials that you can bring in, allow you to compete with with other kind of casual players or maybe intermediate level players. That's going to be something that's appealing to people, but they need to feel like they're getting enough playtime out of the deal. So I think a lot of the tuning and the balance in there is going to be in what are the capture rates and the energy rates in a run. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to be in Overworld today as opposed to one of the other titles. As we look at the overall costs, with 5,000 energy to basically be working on, I didn't only focus on alluvial capturing during this run, but over the course of it, I picked up a few nodes, and I think I've had 4 encounters, maybe 5. One of those, I wasn't able to capture anything, but at the end of the run, if you're able to get somewhere, I think in the 8 to 10 alluvial range, it feels like a good run to me. And in that case, I think people are going to feel like there's value, no matter what the prices are. I think what's going to happen is if we aren't careful and we have too few alluvials that are actually captured per run, if it's only 2 or 3 or 4. That's, I think, a bigger risk, even if it's a very low price point, because I think you want people to feel like they're able to spend some time, get out here, and actually have some good, good capturing opportunities, and they come back with something. Now, I do think that probably the frequency of higher tier alluvials is probably a bit too high if that's the structure that you're putting around it. So I actually, and this is going to upset some people I think that have been playing Overworld, I think we actually need to reduce the drop rates a bit on some of the rare alluvials that are out here, because if you want to capture those uber rare alluvials, I think that needs to be the the component that you're going to have to play a good bit, and you're of course then going to have to also be paying some more to get more of those runs in to see them. But I think to be able to get some of the more common alluvials, we want that to be very accessible to people, right? It shouldn't be so hard that you have to do 8 or 10 runs to be able to build kind of a starter deck out. And so the other kind of related question is, well, what about if we've got a more competitive deck? If someone's trying to really push in the arena, what should that cost? This is where I think you don't have to look anywhere beyond Web 2 price points. We for sure can have a higher cost, and I'm thinking several hundreds of dollars to be able to build like an uber competitive deck out. That's not going to be a shock or any kind of a surprise to anyone who's played Web 2 games that have any kind of pay per cycle or pay per loop mechanic. So I would expect if you want to build an elite deck with with a Ramfire out here and some of these other tier 4, tier 5 alluvials, you should be expecting, if you do that all kind of organically and you get standardized RNG, you should expect to be doing probably a few hundred runs in the overworld to build that out. Obviously, if you're going to go instead the route you're only focused on the auto battler, for sure you're going to be able to buy some of those on the secondary market. Those prices are not something that we can control directly, but what will happen is, based on the overall drop rates and the cost to do runs in the overworld, that's going to dictate a lot of the time what people are valuing the specific alluvials at on the secondary market as well. Good, Miles. Good to see you. How will it work with the more rare as the game goes? Would that mean less encounters or chance of capturing gets less? So there's two different elements, and I'm not entirely sure which one you're referring to. So I'll try and just answer both. One is the overall decreasing likelihood of alluvials being found in the overworld. This is a mechanic that Aaron has talked about a lot with the community. So in this case, as you capture a certain number of Ramfires or Ramfies or Laluras or whatever it might be, it gets harder, relatively speaking, to capture more of that particular alluvial. And so that doesn't mean, I think, less encounters or the chance of capturing gets less. As I understand it, it's more relative ratio of the overall alluvials that you're going to see in the overworld. But again, that's a good question. We can clarify with him. My intention with that is when I'm speaking about price points, I don't necessarily think that it should be, we need any mechanic other than that to reduce the likelihood that you're going to find a specific alluvial out in the overworld. I think, allowing people to just continue doing runs, and you've got this sort of decaying spawn curve over time. Again, not with the number of encounters you see per run, but the overall likelihood of seeing a specific rare alluvial drops over time over the course of a given wave. Yeah, good. Ricky is excited to see the proposal for the ecosystem of everything cost-wise. Market prices are going to be reflected on the runs, fuel, shards, etc. Yeah, totally agree. I think it's a critical element. I don't know that this current council epoch is going to be the one that makes that decision or not. But I think whether it's us or whether it's going to be some combination of the strategy and the gaming council next epoch, it's one of the most critical decisions that's going to be made, because it's going to set the stage for how well and how quickly the game is adopted by players, as much, in my opinion, as the actual gameplay itself. Because if the price points are not aligned properly, people just aren't going to play. That said, one kind of important point, and this is one I wanted to mention because it has been discussed a lot in the past week. I've seen, I think, 4 or 5 different threads on the concept, different discussions in Discord, different ideas. I don't think we had any IAPs formally, but in like the ideas section within Discord that were put out there on free-to-play mechanics. So I'm going to give my take on the game. This is not sort of like the Illuvium official position, and if anyone wants to have a debate or discussion, I'm happy to do so. I think you might get somewhat different answers from some of the team, but I'm pretty comfortable that I know the type of game that we're making, and Illuvium is not structured in a free to play space for the average gamer. The free to play mechanics for all of the titles that we've built out are intended as an onboarding tool to allow players to experience the game and identify the quality level that's been put into it. They are not designed, and our infrastructure, our tokenomics framework, our overall economic connectivity across the titles, none of that is built with the intent that people would stay in a free-to-play mode. And so anyone that's kind of talking about this, in my opinion, needs to understand There are plenty of games that can steer towards a free-to-play model. Most of those do not work. Frankly, if you look at the data and the statistics on games that try to build out free-to-play models using only cosmetics and skins and that sort of deal, most of them fail. The ones that get a lot of attention are the ones that succeed very well, but they have spent years cultivating massive player bases, and they are by far the exception. So obviously, projects like Fortnite and CS:GO and so forth, they have sustainable economies based on free-to-play mechanics. Illuvium is not that, and nothing that we've designed thus far as a project steers towards it. Now, the free-to-play aspects are critically important for the project, but again, it's in my opinion a temporary approach where someone comes in, they play free-to-play for a week, in some cases maybe just an hour, and they love it and say, all right, I'm going to go directly into the overworld. Maybe they play it for a week, maybe they play it for a month or two. But if someone's still playing free to play after 6 months, that's probably an abnormality within the game. And I don't say that as a bad thing, but again, recognizing that the structure that we have with pay per travel and pay per shard costs, and the way that fuel is integrated in the game, none of that is built out with a free-to-play model in mind. And so if you wanted to change that, you could certainly try, but you've got to then unwind a lot of the game design, all of the economic design, including a lot of the tokenomic structures, including the use and utility of land. And so I'm very much not an advocate for a free-to-play mindset being tried to be applied in here. Now, again, there are lots of game projects that I support and that I advise and consult for, and that I work with or partner with ETH Lizards, that are building out more of a free-to-play model. Totally on board with the concept, but that needs to be how you designed the entire product from the beginning. And we are not at all structured in that way. So, in fact, I would actually make the argument we're about as far as you can get from that with the way everything is set, right? We have a pay per loop cycle, and so the idea is we believe that people are going to want the alluvials. They're going to want to be able to play. People are going to be willing to pay money for it. There's nothing wrong with that, in the same way that they are for any other game that has like gotcha sort of mechanics, or pay per cycles. You pay for energy in mobile games to refresh, to keep playing more frequently. All of those mechanics are built into games, and players are happy to spend on games that they enjoy. And in many cases, we've seen it with Illuviums here. If it's a very low price point and you say, all right, I can spend $1 today and I'm going to go out, or $2, and I'm going to do a run in the overworld, and I've got a chance, maybe it's a small one, but I could capture a really awesome alluvial, people are going to be willing to do that, and they're not going to feel bad about it afterwards. And I think that's from a low spending standpoint, the players that we're going to be appealing to. And then also, we frankly are very much building a game that's going to be appealing to big spenders and whales. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Like you need big spenders in many cases to sustain games. And if you look at typical monetization models for any kind of game that's not a kind of single purchase, 90 to 95% plus, in many cases it's like 97% of the total spend is coming from the top 5 to 10% of the player base. So in general, I think we need to make sure when people are putting out ideas that they understand what type of game are we actually building, and who are the customers that we're building it for. Even the point that we don't have mobile enabled, even though we'd like to get there. This game is not being built for people that are going to have a total budget of $2 per month to spend on gaming. It's just not our target audience. So again, and if you lose sight of that, you're going to end up trying to appeal to too many groups that are not your core customer, and you're going to end up building mechanics and economic structures that don't work for the people that are actually your target customer and audience. Good. All right. Let me start this battle off real quick. I know that was kind of a long. I hope it didn't feel like a rant, but just it's an important topic, and I wanted to get my my opinions out with enough detail that anyone that's listening kind of recognizes where I'm coming from. Again, reasonable people can disagree on sort of the mechanics, but I think we have to, it's dangerous to disagree if we're not on the same baseline with what is the core product that we're actually trying to build out. So that's what I would just encourage everyone to keep in mind. We're going to grab an extra rogue over here and kick it off. So, yeah, Ricky, your feedback. You can max free to play in about 2 months. All Illuvials and gear upgrades. It has a ceiling in endgame where you can't progress any further. Yeah, I think that's true today. I would also argue that as we see future seasons of Illuvials come out, probably it's the case that you're going to be able to capture, the next cycles of tier zeros. It'll take longer, so it might double or triple that. Additionally, as you get more and more regions that are out, people are going to want to have the experience of going through different regions a little bit as well. So I think that's another sort of repeatability mechanic that's going to be of interest to free-to-play players. But I do agree. Yeah, in the current state, it's not structured for that. Now, you could always change that, but I don't think it's necessary to do so. Yeah, Miles' feedback. I agree. Free to play for onboarding. Let the players trial the games prior to the investment. Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially in Web3, right? People are going to look at it with, in many cases, a very dim view. Is this even going to be a worthwhile game at all for me to get engaged with? That's a perfectly fair question, right? I want people to ask that, and then I want someone to say, "Hey, come watch me play for 10 minutes and make your decision afterwards." And then, if you want to give it a shot, just go over here. You don't need to understand Web3. You don't need to set up your own wallet. We've got very easy on-ramps for free-to-play. Just come over here and sign up, set up an account, and you're off and running. That absolutely gives a very low barrier to entry. And anytime that you can eliminate friction in a process like this, you're going to have a much better chance of having a good conversion for potential gamers that want to try it out. 220, I think. Yeah, let's just see if we can find one more deposit around here. We're going to be done on energy for encounters for this run, but we can jump over to stage 2s. If all Illuvials are sellable and you can capture tier 0 Illuvials for free, even with a very low market value for tier 0, would some free-to-play players loop capture tier 0 and sell? Yes, Miles, 100%. Actually, I'm going to be very eager to see some of the on-chain analytics that we're going to be able to get from this, because remember, we're going to be able to see players' wallets. We're going to be able to see what transactions they engage with. And so I'm super keen to see, and also, even if the person is not going to be doxxed, you're going to see stories of, the tier free-to-play gamer who basically earns their way in through skill, good trading of tier zeros in the marketplace to basically fund their entire structure. And I actually am super eager. I hope that I'm still going to be able to create some content, and I like to find somebody. So if anyone ever watches this video and you're going to be that person, the person that becomes a pro or semi-pro level arena player by virtue of just going out and capturing from tier zeros and working your way all the way up to a highly competitive arena deck. I'm 100% sure that we will have multiple stories like that, especially the individuals that are going to be highly specialized. So you talk in your question about the Illuvial specifically. I think there's actually going to be a pretty strong market for players that are going to be out just doing mining and resource gathering. And then they're going to do crafting to build out gear. So this is a point I think Kieran made back in the early days of the Overworld launch. Like, how much do you think the entire fully upgraded set of the jetpack and the boots and everything is going to go for? 3 ETH, 5 ETH. I mean, this is a non-zero price point. People are going to be willing to pay it, especially early days. So for those folks that are going to want to get out and and really kind of grind and push in the first week to get a substantial amount of the resource nodes, and they're going to spend the time in craft. They're going to be highly active in terms of engaging with trading on the marketplace. There are going to be plenty of people that will be able to fund their entire gameplay experience for years based on that. And I know, I think I made this comment. I think it was in Wildfire. Ricky, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I had a few folks that asked me for my thoughts on sort of early state game economies and what it might look like in the days immediately after launch. So this is probably a good time to make a disclaimer. Nothing that I'm sharing on this stream, especially right now, is financial advice. So certainly don't take my opinion for any of your decision making on what you are comfortable spending or not spending or paying to buy any resources in Illuvium or any other game. Okay. Having said that, my experience in games like World of Warcraft with fresh server launches, lots of other sort of open economy, even like back to I think some of the earlier versions, Diablo, where we had real money auction houses. There is a premium to be made by players that get in early, that know the mechanics and are able to engage with them, that push hard and spend a lot of time getting resources and then selling them to players who want to be more uber competitive early on, but may or may not have as much time to play. So there is a huge arbitrage opportunity in most of these games where players can, if you're there during the launch week and out running around, you will often see prices be really, really high in the very first hours of whether it's an alluvial or it's gear, whatever other items you might want to be trading here. Prices will be really, really high, and then they'll go even higher, and then they'll drop off after a few days, after more and more people get in and start playing. So there's usually a premium early. It'll drop off, and then there's no telling afterwards where it kind of stabilizes. It really depends on the resource and the mechanics, but generally you'll see some more price stability emerge somewhere in the 3 to 4 week mark after a new game launches. So again, not financial advice, but for those that have not had experience with new server launches and new title launches, that's what you'll typically see. So if you can get in early, it's always a good thing to do so. All right, I'm going to take the next few questions quickly because I'm elaborating too much for all the topics that are coming in. I heavily played WoW. Do I see a season pass, DLC, monthly or yearly membership being something that could work for Illuvium? 100%. I am a huge advocate of I actually think the best approach, and we see this often in Web 2, is sort of a monthly pass structure where you are able to pay a certain amount, and that basically is guaranteeing you to buy some ratio of fuel each month. And so what I would envision is whatever that moment is. So let's say today is the 6th of April for me at 9:53. So if I buy the monthly pass at that time, then basically what happens is each month at that same time on the 6th of the month at 9:53 p.m. That pass is going to renew, and it's going to purchase the fuel from the marketplace to give me that amount of fuel for the next month. Now, some people are going to be like, oh my gosh, well, that could probably mean that some people are going to end up having different amounts of fuel from month to month based on the in-game economy. And my answer is yes, it will. 100%. And I think that's okay. I think if you're someone that's willing to be out here and playing, you're going to understand that the value of fuel is going to fluctuate in terms of real world dollars each month. As long as we've got reasonable stability in the market, which we will at least initially on, because the guardrail structure around the land mechanics prevents things from getting too far out of alignment from a cost perspective. That I think is going to ensure that it's not going to vary too much to where players are so skeptical of that. This also is going to be very, very appealing for casual players who they're not going to want to be following market swings each month. And they're not going to be out there trying to trade. They just want to go out and play in the overworld. And when they want to do a run, go out for a couple hours and capture some alluvials, right? They're not worried if it's, I'm getting 5,000 Krypton or I'm getting 4,700 Krypton or 5,800 each month. So I think that's a good approach. It's an approachability method that lots of Web 2 gamers are comfortable with, and it allows the folks that probably don't want to sort of risk themselves overspending beyond what their budget may be, to just say, I'm putting in, and buying the pass, and away I go.
I'll take it.
Also, here's another point that I would mention. Actually, I think this is important. If we don't, someone else will. And as a project, so what I mean by that is, if Illuvium doesn't put out a monthly pass, you will see an organization. In fact, Lizards would be one. I would suggest we could do that same mechanic. We could put out a monthly pass, and you buy the monthly pass from us, and then we just airdrop to your wallet. You give us the wallet address, we airdrop the appropriate fuel for the month, and we're going to set the pass, rates at such that we're going to take a little bit of a premium from it. So I would rather have Illuvium actually build it out directly in this case than have someone else. But again, if we don't, totally okay. Somebody will do so, and I don't think it's a bad thing for the ecosystem either way. I do think it's probably cleaner from an onboarding perspective for potential gamers, to where they're going to say, I'd rather just buy it from the studio themselves and not from like a third-party organization. So, good. Do I think $2 is too cheap for travel? When you say roughly 10 alluvials per travel, that's an average cost of 20 cents per alluvial. It seems too cheap to me. Chris, one really critical point here is that's only the travel costs. Remember, you've got shard costs, you've got shard curing costs. All of those are additional elements that also require fuel. And so I'm not saying 20 cents per average alluvial capture, but what I am saying is when you add all of those elements up, assuming, because again, the entire purpose of the land balance is that Krypton, Solon, and Hyperion are all roughly equally valued. What that means is you basically are going to need to triple the cost of travel for the overall cost to capture in order to get that balance right. Now, I know and recognize that when we're talking about building items, not every one of the three fuel types is used specifically for capturing alluvials. But again, if you want to think about it in that perspective, that would mean 50 cents per alluvial or $5, net per run when you include the shard costs. So that's where I'm landing at that number. I'm taking all of the fuel types into account. It's going to be money to hit the ground running. I'm taking 3 weeks off from work. Ricky, I also am going to be keen to try and take some time off. Again, I'm hopeful that Lizards will give me a little bit of time once I'm fully moved over there to be able to take a week off when Illuvium launches. So probably something I'll have to negotiate with some of the community and also some of our big investors. Good. Oh, yeah. Ricky also mentioned the additional fuel costs for shards. Miles, can't wait to see him participate in the Overworld mechanics. I agree. Mining and crafting is probably going to be pretty lucrative. It's also going to be the most boring. So again, this is one of those where, for most folks, there's a premium on the roles that aren't as engaging that people are willing to pay for. Folks that build bots out and make spreadsheets and spend all their time poring over marketplaces, they're actually the ones that usually make the most money in any open economy. And this is true whether you're talking about World of Warcraft or EVE Online or anything else where there's money to be made. It's actually the traders that have the biggest advantage. So that said, for the folks that's appealing to, they're generally metagamers and are probably not the ones that are wanting to be out in the auto battler anyways. So more power to them. And this is a game that's going to be very appealing, I think, to that class of players. Good.
I'll use it.
Ricky, you want to go down with your name etched in the history books for being the first to capture a hollow, dark hollow, or specific alluvial. Fully agree. You see, funny, I just mentioned EVE Online, but you see that in some games where the studios are very in tune with their communities. They have a lot of longevity, and they'll build in sort of monuments in different ways to
Got it.
highly visible or influential community members in some cases. So there were a couple examples that I can think of from Eve where that was the case. So yeah, this is a super cool part of the project here. The stronger connection between the community and the dev team, and the council is a main part of why I think Web3 is just built differently.
This looks good.
Ricky, would be better to airdrop fuel each day for monthly pass holders so that the daily active user stays high. Yes and no. So I think this actually gets back to the question of what would the cost be and the price point for the pass. So if someone's paying enough for a monthly pass, and maybe there's tiers, right? Maybe you have a $100 a month pass, and then it's basically whatever that $100 gets you. I could agree to some extent on that. That yeah, you would probably have people that go out and play daily. I think though, the individuals that are actually playing on a daily basis, or an almost daily basis, they're probably going to want to have more control over their economic spending and their total cost. So I think they're probably the ones that are much more hardcore, and they're not going to want to be kind of at the whims of the general market for when they buy fuel. So I'm not sure how many of them would actually be the target audience for a monthly pass mechanic, but I could be wrong. I think there's certainly going to be a mix across a variety of different different demographics that are going to want to play. Good, Chris. Do I see a stagger launch happening for open beta? Zero starting 2 to 3 weeks prior to Overworld launching. The landholders can sell fuel. I don't think so. The question that we haven't talked about in detail is, does it make sense to basically allow the landholders in at a certain time to build up the land plots to allow you to generate fuel that you can then sell back into the pool before you start, is a fair question, and that's one that I think certainly from a fair launch standpoint, it's no issue with that, because as long as all of the landholders are able to get in at the same time, I don't think there's any issue. You're not impacting anything in the main game other than you're just allowing the fuel to be produced that's going to be needed for those first runs to take place. I also think from a dev standpoint, that particular example makes sense, because then you can have the team focused on the full live launch for Illuvium 0, give it a week or a week and a half or whatever you need to allow everything to kind of build its way through the system, and then you could have the arena launch afterwards as a step 2, and then the overworld launch as a step 3, again, where the arena is probably just the Ascendant arena, and you've got your daily deck, and you can sitting at one time. And so from just a pure technical delivery standpoint, I'm not opposed to that conceptually. The key is, though, with the fair launch, every single person that starts any game has the same opportunity as everyone else, right? You're starting at the same time, the same place. No one can buy an item in the game that gives them an advantage early. And so the same thing, like the landholders, they can generate fuel, but they're not using it for themselves. They're selling it back into the pool, and then if they want to go out in the overworld to go and do their runs, they're the same as everyone else who's in the overworld. So I think that can work, and technically it's a sound approach. But again, there's also something to be said from a marketing perspective of having the global launch of 3 main titles that are all going live at the same time. Will at that point have integration of Illuviums, I'm sure, in some ways. So you can also brand it as all 4 of the main titles that are launching together systemically. There's some pretty cool value in that as well. So again, I don't know that I have a specific idea as far as which one's better yet. I'd want to have some more dialogues with the team first. Yeah, good. Oh God, tax-related question. Okay, Ricky. I haven't even read the question yet, but when you intro this with tax-related question, my initial thought is I'm not going to answer this, but let's see where you're going. Will there be tools developed to help track gains and losses, burning materials, capturing alluvials? Layer 2 doesn't really have tools to help with it. We have had discussions about that as a community. Frankly, I have not in my role in the council. Um, I recall some dialogues about having sort of full transparency for what your wallet activities have been from Aaron at some point. This was months ago, though. So I do expect that there will be some opportunities for that, and recognizing that it's a very real concern. This is sort of this is the problem with the current structures of commodities and securities regulation in a lot of jurisdictions today, where the concept, does the SEC and the CFTC, if you're in the U.S., and the equivalent governing bodies in other countries, is it really the right approach that they're evaluating how much was that particular Ramfire worth that you got in the game, and when you sold it, you cashed out and you went and bought 20 different jetpacks, and then you sold those to other people. Like, tracking and reporting on every single microtransaction in a game. I can't imagine that there's actually a tax agency that is going through that content and that there's any real value there. What I'm more a proponent of is you should have, certainly, you can declare taxable events at whatever situation you want to, but basically you should just be requesting a final on-chain review at the end of a year or a quarter, if you're paying quarterly taxes, whatever, to where you're evaluating that total cost on the front and the back end, with any deltas, and you're just reporting that, as opposed to, hey, in January I caught 20 lynxes, and then I burned 18 of them to upgrade to some stoic lynxes, and like that. I'm not sure who that's helping to report that level of detail. So again, there's still a lot of movement that has to take place from a regulatory standpoint here. But I do think over time you're going to see agencies begin to recognize that it's not really a sustainable approach. So I do agree taxes are a pain. I'm also in the process of finalizing my quarterlies right now too. Where are we? Nothing super appealing here. We're going to go trying to find another encounter. Good. Miles, I love the idea of deeds and accomplishments, rewarding all aspects of gameplay, even titles, badges. The question is, are they all NFTs and sellable? Here's my take on this. I think that when it comes to titles and achievements, and I think most projects are going to go this direction. If they aren't already, they will begin building out a soul-bound NFT that tracks all of your mechanics on chain. This is my recommendation for a number of projects in the space that are building out games that are extensive enough to have that. So think of it this way. Would you rather have a badge that says, Miles Above was the first player to capture, Hollow Ramfire, and it occurred on, September 1st of 2023. Would you rather have a badge that says that then you can turn around and you can sell that badge for, I don't know, what's someone else going to be willing to pay for that? $1, $5? Maybe if it's like the world first, if it doesn't have your name, your username etched in it, maybe someone else is wanting to pay for it because then they can kind of pass it off as their own achievement. Maybe someone will pay $100 for it then. I don't know. But would you rather really have that as an NFT that's tradable, or would you rather have a soul-bound NFT that is your player record in game, and that becomes then your on-chain gaming persona tracking all the history? In this case, Illuvium would presumably build one for themselves, and it captures all of your key achievements, that you won such and such a tournament, that you captured that particular Ramfire, that you had finished, these 15 particular in-game achievements, collections and Illuvatars, whatever. Would you rather have that as a soulbound NFT showing your in-game activities, or would you rather be able to sell each one of those individual achievements to somebody else? I think most people probably would prefer to actually have their own in-game record. And so, I think that's going to be the preferable mechanic. That said, there may be some that are that are different and that are more valuable. What I would say is, if you're going to make an achievement into something that gives you an unlock, like I think we saw some of the suits that were leaked recently. If you're going to have a mechanic that gives you an item that then is sort of reflective of that level of achievement, I think that is fine to make transferable, but those should then not be one of ones. Those should just be one of X for any one that actually achieved that particular tier of whatever the gameplay was. Yeah. Good. So we've got tax reporting software advice, I think. So again, you come out here to office hours and you get all sorts of useful info. It's great. Good. So, all right, let me jump back over. There were just a couple other questions that I wanted to hit on. We talked about free-to-play already. This one, I like this one because it was actually a council question. Kieran might answer it on the town hall, but I will do so for him, for anyone that watches this. Why did the council think it was a good idea to sell ETH at $1,300? We sold what's now worth $4 million for $2.5 million. It's a good question. Two reasons. The first one is that despite all of our combined knowledge, the council does not claim nor believe that we have a crystal ball as to the value of futures of any individual coins. Certainly, if we knew that ETH was going to be valued at double the value 3 months from when we had sold it, we wouldn't have sold it. That said, the other key component that I would raise is the council is not intending to be a hedge fund. And if you are investing in a project that is treating the runway for the project in a manner that's reminiscent of a hedge fund, I would recommend that you consider why you're engaging with that project, because that is entirely fiscally irresponsible. If you are a project that is based on typical revenue generation and through product delivery, you have a large team that you're supporting, it is financially irresponsible for you to put your money in coins of which the value is going to fluctuate wildly. Now, we certainly know and have seen even stable coins like USDC, there is always risk in the space. This is one of the topics that we've been discussing and talking about very hotly within the council. At least my, I would say, preference is we would like to have more of our runway in fiat, despite the fact that we are a Web3 project. However, that eliminates transparency. And so if you don't have the runway values on chain, I would ask the community to go no further than the last couple weeks of discussion. We would have lots of community members who are very disappointed that they can't run all kinds of on-chain reporting and metrics to highlight the runway on a weekly basis. So there's a trade-off for transparency versus stability if you're in fiat versus stable coins. But again, if you're in a project and the primary focus on the project is building out solutions, and you're using millions of dollars every month to pay the team to do so, you should not be gambling and wagering on the upcoming value of Ethereum or any other Ether or any other your token. It's irresponsible to do so. Good, Miles. Interesting point on soulbound tokens. You need to do research on these. Soulbound tokens are pretty straightforward, actually. And I, as a former WoW player, I've always loved the title. I think it actually came from Vitalik, who kind of coined the term, because the concept of soulbound originated in World of Warcraft, which is the idea that you have a specific asset, and once you obtain that asset, you can't trade it. So there in WoW, there are specific items that you would get generally as like raid drops. You can get it, but you can't trade it. And so it's actually an interesting mechanic. I'm going to highlight a key transition that we've seen over time that's interesting for our community. But what would typically happen when World of Warcraft launched is you would have you would have a raid. People would go in and you distribute loot in a variety of ways, using either like a points-based system or a bidding system or like a loot council that would distribute it across the players in the game. Once you got those items, they were bound to your account and your character and could not be traded to anyone else at any point for any reason. They could just be, disenchanted or destroyed or whatever, but they were locked to you as a character. This was from a Blizzard standpoint. This was intended to force players to engage with the game instead of just go out and farm gold and buy all of the best items in game from other players. Right? Makes a ton of sense. You're able to really ensure. This was an absolute terrible encounter. I don't need 3 chickens, so all right, whatever. We're gonna throw something out here. That said, really interesting mechanic that we've seen evolve in World of Warcraft, for anyone that's followed it more recently, is the concept of raids now no longer are geared around players actually going and engaging with the mechanics. Instead, what you have that's emerged is raid mechanic where players will engage in what's called a GDKP. So you would a gold dragon kill points concept where you would be paying money to enter the raid as you bid on items. So let's say you've got 40 players that are all in a raid together. You kill a boss and an item that you want drops. You would say, I'm going to pay $100 for that item, and if I'm the highest bidder, I'm the one that's going to get that item back out at the end. And if I'm not, then that $100 is going to be split among all 40 of the raid members at the end of the raid, right? Or 100 gold pieces in this case. So you'll go through the raid. You'll have people that bid insane amounts. I mean, literally thousands of gold for an individual item that would have taken potentially months to accumulate if it's a sort of one-of-one legendary item, whatever the case might be. So these GDKPs emerged, and they actually have become by far and away the best way to farm for gold in the game, because players' willingness to transact and to buy items from others is much higher than their willingness to go out and grind and kill more boars outside in the open world. So the really interesting mechanic that I wanted to highlight here is this is what we're actually building in Web3, guys. The Web 2 gamers that would be, I would say, sort of the most OG purist in open world economies, they have discovered that giving people the ability to buy, sell, trade, and transact on items is the most efficient way to market price. And they're already doing it, even with soulbound tokens as the currency. Basically just means that you're setting up, you have some general cost of the raid leaders on the front end for organizing the activities, but everyone else gets the same overall cut. And then every item in game becomes something that can be bought, even soulbound. So again, I say all of that not because I'm specifically wanting to highlight WoW, but because when we talk about the value of owning your own assets, Web2 gamers want it, and they're actually building it today. They just don't know that it's already available in Web3. And if you have a good game, you don't need to engage in those kind of silly mechanics. Just have the items be fully tradable, and off you go. Good. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Oh yeah, what if ETH was now $600 afterwards? Illuvium would be praised for selling at $1,300. Yeah, for sure. Right, it's always easy in hindsight to make that decision. And again, this kind of I would say this also for anyone thinking about going into the council. It's important that you are willing to build a set of premises and beliefs that you stand behind and you're willing to endorse, because it's easy to second guess any decision that's made, right? And so again, and I'm not, whoever asked that particular question, totally fine. Like, I get it. I've had other people ask it to me in other projects as well. Why did you sell your token at a certain level? Again, because I'm despite all the things that I know, actually knowing the future with certainty is not one of them. So that said, Miles, I did indeed get cucked on that last encounter. It's pretty brutal. But again, I got a couple more tier ones, so it is what it is. I like the name Soulbound. We need something more tied into Illuvium lore, and the concept of Illuvibound. Yeah, I mean, hey, I think it works okay. Again, like when I'm endorsing the concept of a soulbound NFT for folks, like I think in the case of like a player's record, if the soulbound NFT reflects you as an individual as opposed to your stuff, it makes sense. We look at a project like Nor, that's what they're building out. Like their entire premise behind their games, their infra games, is you, the player, are the NFT, and so when you die in combat, your NFT gets burned. So they have basically a pure sort of hardcore gameplay mode that they're leaning into, right? And I love that. You know, it's a great concept. Lots of players that's going to appeal to. Not everyone, and you know that's not going to be the case for every single time that you play in their game. But a fair bit of the time, you know, that's going to be for major competitions. The way that the mechanics are working. Ricky, I appreciate you stand behind me and endorsing me. I definitely do not know everything, as I think I think my wife may be watching the stream as well. She can certainly attest to that as well. So, sweetie, if you're there, remember that I'm not doxxed, so don't reply with your actual accounts. But anyone that is curious, she is in both eBlizzard's and Illuvium Discord. So you may at some point be able to figure out who she is based on a comment that she'll make offhandedly. Good. All right. So let's see. I think I had one other question. Yeah. With GovV2 around the corner, how do you balance the importance of having experienced council members in their respected fields with the potential value of bringing individuals who are less experienced but demonstrate a deeper passion for the DAO? This may sound almost counterintuitive given the answer that I gave earlier about, you know, if you're interested, you should definitely run. I actually place more value on the relevant experience. Studies have shown that, generally speaking, you're better off getting someone who's a much higher quality candidate for a role versus someone that loves the brand. And I would, as a first example, point you to coaches of professional or like high-level college athletics teams. Generally, getting a coach who is an alumni of an organization, who presumably, you know, they're more strongly motivated than a typical coach that has no connectivity to that program, they do worse on average than someone who has no affiliations with the school coming in. And so, again, I think, you know, you see that also in other projects. There's a tendency to see more. It's gonna sound bad. I don't want to say that it's like nepotism, because it's not. But let's say a soft nepotism where individuals that are just super well known by the community are favored over someone who's not as well known but maybe more qualified. And so, again, my preference is, given the choice, I would rather have someone that has a stronger skill set and is then appropriately incentivized to work in the best interest of the organization. I think that leads to better outcomes. Again, just empirically. That said, better by far is to have both. And again, given the size of our community, the breadth of the skill sets that we see across community members, I think that we're going to find plenty of both highly skilled and passionate folks within the community to move us forward in GovV2. So, good. He will be doxxed one day. Yeah, I'll always be Annie to you. Thanks, Ricky. I've had a few people ask lately. I'm planning on just continuing to go by Annie. I think it's at this point going to be too difficult for me to change that, even once I would be doxxed. Last question. I should have done this one early. Has any of the negativity on Twitter affected the team's morale? This is kind of a bummer to end the stream on. So somebody asked me another question that I can take after I address this one real quick, whatever that might be. So the answer is yes. I have talked to multiple team members, some of whom were frankly severely disheartened, some of whom were actually at the point where they were considering, like, is this really the right project that I want to stick with? Because up until now, I think the team had felt fully supported by the community, even when there were like difficult discussions. Not every person in the community for every team member, but generally speaking, I think the team almost unanimously had felt that the community was aligned with them. That took a hit this week and over the last couple of weeks. So again, my job as a council member is to represent the community and the DAO. It's also, though, partly to make sure that we're appropriately engaging with the team, because the products and the solutions that are being built out are 100% being built out by the team. They're not being built by the community nor the council. And so I would just encourage people to recognize the tone and the impact that your questions, and more so even that your statements, have on real people who are actually building what frankly is the best game that I've seen in Web3 thus far. And I've looked at a lot of them. Again, I'm in, I think all of you know, dozens of other projects. All of the the large projects in the space that I can see, many of them have great solutions that are being built out. You will not find a better one today at its stage in development than Illuvium right now. And so just remember, there are real people behind the screen. The risk of having such a close-knit interaction between the community and the team is negative sentiment and vitriol has an equally strong impact, in fact more so as positive. And so this is frankly why most Web 2 organizations don't let their development team anywhere near message boards, and they have their own community management team members to cover that, because they don't want their developers just getting hammered day after day. No one's going to want to continue building for a community that they feel doesn't appreciate them. And so, again, take that for what it's worth. If you felt like that was targeted at you, I would just ask you why, because I'm not naming any names. And if you feel like, as any community member, you may have gone overboard, what you do at that point is up to you. I do encourage people, though, to reflect, and sometimes if emotions get the best of you, saying so and apologizing is a good way as a mature professional to try and rectify the situation. But again, just remember, the way that we approach topics, especially challenging ones, is reflective of who we are and what kind of community we want to be building. So just a few final thoughts there. I don't see any other questions. Again, that was not really the question that I should have planned to end on. So Ricky or Jilly or someone, throw another question out, and we'll leave on a high note, because I want to get you guys out for anyone that wants to view or listen in on the town hall with Kieran and Aaron here in just a minute. So anybody else? Anything before we wrap up today? As the new Chief ETH Lizard Officer, new council member, how excited am I for the next year? Very. It has been a long road. I've been interested in moving into Web3 full-time for well over a year now, and been kind of working towards that. So obviously I didn't have ETH Lizards specifically in mind with that when I started this journey. I didn't even know who ETH Lizards were. But I couldn't be happier. It's a community that I feel really fits me personally. I think that there's tremendous potential there, and given the fact that it allows the organization to really be leaning into partnerships and growth with the other best projects that are building in the sector, that's exactly where I want to be positioned moving forward. So couldn't be more excited. It's been a lot of work. It's going to be a lot more work, and I'm going to need everyone in ETH Lizard supporting me. But again, we have so much potential for the future. And now, for anyone that hasn't seen, we finished our redeployment last week. Staking launches almost exactly 12 hours from now, which has been a key interest topic for the community for months and months. So yeah, we're at a super bright point for ETH Lizards, just like Illuvium. So thanks for that, Ricky. All right, so on that note, I am going to hop into the poison pool here. We're going to head back immediately to the obelisk and port out. Again, thanks for everyone that joined live or that's catching this after the fact. And if you're free now, let's head on over to Discord, and we'll catch up with the town hall with Kieran and Aaron. So thanks, guys.